Blessed Karl of Austria, last king of the Catholic Kingdom of Austria. Who is he, and why does he matter to America? All of this with Charles Coulombe coming up next.
Thanks. Joining us now via Zoom chat is Charles Coulombe to talk about his book, Blessed Charles of Austria. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Joe. How are you?
Praise be to God, I am alive, and that counts. And that counts.
For more than a little.
That's right. We live in interesting times, to say the least. But you know, what's interesting about what we're going to talk to you about is I didn't know a lot about Blessed Charles of Austria until you wrote the book last year. You published it last year, and then there were talks and there was a lot of conversation about it. Up until then, I didn't really pay a lot of attention to this person, and he lived in truly interesting times as well. Can you start by telling us who he is and why he matters, not just from a faith perspective, but from a history perspective as well?
Well, the short way to answer that question is that he was the last emperor of Austria-Hungary. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means he was the inheritor of, on one level, 800, and on another, a lot longer tradition of Catholic governing, of Catholic leadership, lay leadership specifically. Obviously, in all that time, there were good and bad, better and worse figures, but he epitomized all that was best in them. He inherited his country's participation in World War I when he became the emperor. The war had been going for 2 years. You may remember that it started because his uncle, the then heir to the throne, was assassinated in Sarajevo. Well, he was presented with two major problems on two different fronts. One was the war itself, which he wanted ended as soon as possible. Unfortunately, a desire that was not shared by many other leaders on either side. And usually his attempts at peace would be favored by one side or the other only when they were losing. And then as soon as they seemed to get an advantage, they'd be against it. The other problem he faced with was a more equitable reorganization of his country, which was a problem that, again, he inherited. And he had some bright ideas to deal with it, but unfortunately, thanks to the war, he never got the chance to really put them into practice. But against that terrible background, he lived the faith, and he was a great family man, a great father. Both in public and private life, he lived the faith, and did so facing innumerable challenges, not just while he was ruling his country, but after it collapsed, after the end of the war. Twice he attempted to regain the throne of Hungary, but his redoubtable wife stuck by him in all of that, and all the while they continued to have a family life. He ended up dying very tragically, partly, I'm sorry to say, due to the intransigence of his former foes, the British, French, and Americans. He died on the island of Madeira of pneumonia in 1922 at the age of 30. Now I've gone blank, but he was in his early 30s.
Wow, he's young.
He was very young, and a real example in everything he did. Another thing that up until I wrote the book, I really hadn't thought about, but he was also a supremely good example for the products of broken homes and difficult families. His own parents were very badly matched, and his father died of syphilis. So I mean, it was, yeah. He came from he came from a very difficult background. But what was interesting is that not only did he stay on good terms with both of his parents, despite their shall we say, displeasure with each other, he got the best out of each of them. So from his mother, he got her very deep piety, her seriousness of purpose, without her dour manner. And then from his father, he got his charm, his easy way of doing things, his way of, well, charm is, I guess, really what sums it up, his sense of humor and everything, but not his promiscuity. And if you think about it, every individual who comes from a background like that is that's the best they could possibly do.
Yeah. Well, we're talking with Charles Coulombe. We only have about a minute or so before we have to go to our break. We're talking about his book, Blessed Charles of Austria, published by TAN. You can find it over at the Tumblr House, by the way, tumblrhouse.com. Why Charles? Why not Karl?
Well, they're interchangeable, really, and it was almost a flip of the coin because even in English he's called Karl a lot. But Charles is the English, and so that's what we ended up settling on. You've got a lot of problems like that. Although his great uncle, who was the emperor before him, everybody calls Franz Joseph. Very, very rarely will you see him referred to as Francis Joseph.
Let's talk about the political situation in Europe for these rulers. I mentioned yesterday was our feast day of Our Lady of Victory, and the difficulty to bring the Holy League together to stem the tide of the Ottoman Empire, the Saracens, invading Europe and slaughtering and pillaging and all the rest. The French would not come to the rescue. There were many others. Was that still the remnants of what Blessed Charles was dealing with?
Well, in a sense, I mean to say, in France, of course, at the time of Lepanto, was on the verge of a civil war. And they were busy with their own issues. Even if they hadn't been, there was an unfortunate, starting in the about 20 years earlier, there was an unfortunate break between the Habsburgs and the French that would last a good 200 years, sadly, and was in itself responsible for all sorts of problems later on. By the time of World War I, France had, of course, overthrown their own monarchy several times. Yeah. And ended up at the time with a very anti-clerical republic, which had oppressed the church horribly in the 10 years prior to the outbreak of World War I. The French government only let up on its suppression of the church when they realized they needed Catholics to die in the trenches, you see. Governments tend to be more friendly to the church when they need to use Catholics. It's funny how that works. I don't know why, just the way it is. But seriously, he did inherit, though, a problem. His wife was, oddly enough, Zita. She was a Bourbon princess, herself of French descent. He was actually very pro-French. And his two brothers-in-law, who were the ones, his mediators, you might say, his messengers in terms of trying to seek peace with the Allies, they had initially, in 1914, although they were very close to him, they had tried to serve in the French army. But because they were members of the old royal family, they were forced to serve in the Belgian army instead. So it was the same, but it was different.
Yeah.
But one of the results of that, of the failed attempts to make peace with the French, was becoming acquainted with Aristide Briand, who at the time was the foreign minister, and then later, when he would try to retake the Hungarian throne, was the French prime minister. And he became very pro-Karl because he got to know him. He got to know him as a lover of peace. And it's really extremely unfortunate, shall we say, to say the least, that when you had men like that, they were constantly frustrated by people who thought they knew better. With 20/20 hindsight, we know they didn't. I mean, at the end of the day, and I'm very sad to have to say this, there were a number of, shall we say, nemesis, evil figures in Charles's story, but probably the worst was our own president, Woodrow Wilson.
Wow. Really? Wow.
Yeah. He was absolutely determined that the Habsburgs and their monarchy would be destroyed, and the same for the Hohenzollerns. But as Winston Churchill, who no one can accuse of being too pro-German or pro-Austrian, well, I mean, you could accuse him of that all you like, but I wouldn't.
Good luck.
He said that it was the American insistence on getting rid of the Habsburgs and the Hohenzollerns and all the rest of them that paved the way for Hitler.
Well, see, that brings a great point that I wanted to ask about, was in regards to Charles of Austria in America. Why is it that there's a rising devotion to Charles of Austria in the U.S., especially whenever U.S. has traditionally been very anti-monarchy. We have a lot of Protestantism, Americanism built into us, where we are very anti-monarchy. We get taught in schools that, it's a good thing we shrugged off the shackles of the British monarchy and that kind of thing. We love our presidents, we love our democracy, our republic. And how on earth did a devotion to a king in the U.S. happen, and what's the importance of that?
Well, I think part of the problem, one of my little jokes is that the United States are the world's longest and most successful Oedipus complex. We got rid of Daddy back in 1783, and we've never quite recovered. But the truth is, and again, as you say, we're fed this stuff from the beginning. We don't notice that no monarchy that pretended to be Christian, not even that of Henry VIII, has dared to do what our free governments do. Redefine marriage, redefine what a human being is. Even Henry VIII had to pretend to go by the law, whereas we just rewrite it.
Right.
Yeah. He doesn't. Yeah, like many of the bad popes in our history, they didn't bother to try to justify their crimes. They just did them. But with us, we justify. We change the law. Yeah. You see, and we're wonderful, as we know.
And I think part of the reason for his popularity is that we're aware of that on a deep level. We know there's something deeply wrong with the way we're doing things. If you don't believe me, put on your mask, go home, and make sure you get your $600 bank transaction looked at.
Right. Exactly.
Otherwise, how will you know if you're safe?
Right.
Right.
But,
exactly.
That's part of it. Another part of it is that he represents a sort of leadership that we're not familiar with, the sacrificial leadership. I mean, we're very much familiar with leaders who don't mind sending us to die for them. What is not so used to us is the idea of a leader who would die for us. And that, of course, part of Christian kingship is the willingness to die for your people. Well, now, that doesn't mean they were all perfect.
Let's talk. I want to jump into that real quick because we have about 5 minutes maybe left in our conversation. To the point of Catholics, especially in America, don't have a sense of aristocracy. We don't have a sense of what it means to have a true and good king. We don't have any examples in our history or our life to really fall back upon. Maybe there are those in Europe who do and can see it from a different light than we do. So is it possible? Have we thrown the baby out with the bathwater here? Should we want a good, holy, righteous aristocracy again?
Well, it depends on what you want ruling you. I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I would rather be ruled by someone who thinks that if he doesn't rule me well, although he may be, his idea of what's ruling me well is maybe not true, but I would rather be ruled by someone who thinks that if he rules me badly, he'll go to hell, than be ruled by someone who sees me as an economic cow to be milked.
Wow.
Or, if necessary, to be sent purely to the slaughter. I mean, what do you want to be ruled by? Do you want to be ruled by scum, or do you want to be ruled by someone you can look up to? It really isn't that difficult.
Yes, but I guess the argument would be I would want to be ruled by somebody who's holy, but that holy person doesn't necessarily need to be a king or a queen, or do they?
Well, let's just say, abstractly, nothing needs to be anything. But in terms of historical reality, in terms of what we've actually seen, you're likely to get it under a Catholic monarchy. I say likely because you find lots of exceptions, but you'll also find a lot of canonized Catholic saints and blesseds amongst the Catholic royalty of Europe.
And so, we have about 2-3 minutes left. Before you finish that thought, I wanted to add on to that real quick, because I heard that Blessed Karl of Austria had a great devotion to the Sacred Heart, and I'm assuming that's probably related to, you said he admired the French, Margaret Mary Alacoque, I'm thinking of her. Could you speak about that in relation to what Joe was just talking about?
I certainly could. The Sacred Heart was, in fact, a huge part of his devotion. Also, you should remember that every royal house, every Catholic royal house in Europe, had a particular kind of devotion that was special to them, a style of devotion, as you might say. With the French was the Religion Royale, it was called, for the Bourbon. With the Habsburgs, it was called the Pietas Austriaca, the Austrian piety. So the Blessed Sacrament, the Sacred Heart, Our Lady, the Passion, the Holy Cross, these were huge in their lives. Now, that doesn't mean all the Habsburgs were pious. Karl's own father, as an example. But even Karl's own father, as a boy, had been enrolled as what was called a child of Mary. And he remembered this on his deathbed. And when I say remembered it on his deathbed, I mean, I'm being very literal. If nothing else, they always had something to go back to. And with Karl, he made the consecration of the Sacred Heart several times.
Wow.
He, both as a family, him personally, his family, and then, of course, he had the bishops consecrate Austria-Hungary to the Sacred Heart.
Praise be to God. That is amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's the kind of thing that happened we're not aware of. Alfonso of Spain consecrated in 1928, I think, consecrated Spain to the Sacred Heart. And this is something, the whole idea of national consecrations is a little beyond us, or if we have them, it's strictly the bishops.
Yeah.
The idea of the head of state doing it
is amazing. That much would be pretty cool. Praise be to God. But we're just about out of time. The book is called Blessed Charles of Austria. It's published by TAN. You can also find it right at tumblerhouse.com. That's tumblerhouse.com. Charles Coulombe, thank you for your time today. We're very grateful. We'd love to have you back and maybe continue a conversation about making aristocracy great again, or Catholic again. That'd be amazing. Praise God. God bless you. Have a great day.
You too. God bless. Bye-bye.
If you like that interview, then be sure to check out some of our other interviews that you might find fascinating. And don't forget to like and subscribe and share this interview with someone that you think will find this informative and inspiring. God love you.